The pain hit me right after the morning pills. A tight, mean grip, like a fist twisting inside my stomach. I was leaning against the kitchen counter, trying not to gasp. My stomach was bloated up like a drum, just like it was every day. I felt heavy, toxic, and so tired I could barely hold myself up. Sandra didn't even look up from checking her phone for her real estate clients. She just let out that loud, impatient sigh, the one that cut deeper than any scolding. "Mom, it is what it is," she muttered without looking at me. "You're not getting any younger. You need to stop making drama out of gas." She didn't understand. She couldn't understand. All my life I'd been a worker, a short-order cook at that busy diner, flipping pancakes and moving fast. Later, a seamstress, sewing uniforms and dresses, precise and quick. I knew hard work, not complaint. But since Thomas passed 5 years ago, my body had turned against me. I felt like a failure at 79 years old, trapped in the spare room of my daughter's big cold house in Portland. I spent my whole life being useful. Now I was just slow, expensive, and sick. I took all those pills every morning and evening. The metformin for my sugar, the lisinopril for my pressure, the statin for cholesterol, and all that ibuprofen for the relentless ache in my joints. 5 small, hard promises to stay healthy, swallowed down twice a day. But the numbers on the doctor's charts never budged. The blood sugar was always too high, and the home blood pressure monitor showed readings that felt dangerous, spiking up to 180 over 110 sometimes. The doctors just shook their heads and increased the dosages, talking about refractory hypertension. I thought, maybe I'm just too old for the medicine to work anymore. The fatigue was the worst part. It wasn't just regular tiredness. It felt like I was dragging concrete blocks around inside me, and every time I caught even the smallest cold, my lungs filled right up. I'd be coughing and rattling, struggling to breathe. One January morning, I woke up with my chest tight and burning. I knew I needed to see a doctor. Sandra had to drive me to the emergency clinic. She was already late for showing a house. "Why do you always turn a sniffle into a crisis, Mom?" She snapped at me in the car, tapping her fingers on the steering wheel. She didn't mean to be cruel, maybe, but the words settled like cold stones in my chest. "It feels like you tried to be sick just to cause trouble." Me? Try to be sick? I had given up everything for her and her brothers. I had sewn through the night just so she could have that new soccer uniform. Now, to be accused of faking illness for attention, that accusation cut me deeper than any knife. I knew then that she was tired of me. She was tired of the hassle, the doctor's bills, and the sheer inconvenience of having a failing mother sleeping in her spare room. The emotional strain was becoming unbearable. I started retreating more and more into my room, trying to make myself small, trying to be quiet. I wanted to be invisible. I knew Sandra wanted freedom, and I was the heavy anchor dragging her down. I realized with a sickening clarity that she wasn't worried about me dying. She was worried about me not dying soon enough. One Tuesday afternoon I was trying to rest, but my back was killing me. I needed the old electric heating pad, which I thought was in the linen closet down the hall. I crept out of my room, moving slow and quiet, trying not to make the floorboards creak. That's when I heard her voice, low and urgent, coming from the kitchen. She was talking to someone on the phone, maybe her husband, maybe a friend. It didn't matter. The tone was pure venom. "I just can't take it anymore," Sandra hissed. I could hear the resentment tighten her voice. "Every week it's a new test, a new complaint. I can't stand caring for a sick old woman anymore, Mark. It's draining my life, and frankly, I need the equity in this house sooner rather than later. I froze, leaning against the cold hallway wall. The air felt sucked out of my lungs. That voice, the same voice I had soothed through fevers, taught how to tie her shoes, and cheered for at every single soccer practice. That voice was spitting out pure hate. A sick old woman. Not Mom, not Margaret. Just a problem, a math problem, standing in the way of $450,000 in house equity. My vision swam. I stumbled back toward my room, tears burning my eyes but refusing to fall. I closed the door silently, careful not to let the latch click. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands trembling like dry leaves. What was I supposed to do? Maybe Sandra was right. Maybe it would be better for everyone if I was gone. The thought came, dark and heavy, because I truly felt like I was falling apart anyway. That night, lying awake, bloated and miserable, I tried to rationalize my pain again. Why was the bloating so aggressive, so immediate, no matter what I ate? Why did those 5 pills, prescribed by the best doctors in Portland, do nothing at all? I decided again. I was just weak. I was just old. But then, as I was getting ready to take my evening pills, the cluster of 5 capsules and tablets, I saw Sandra walk past the kitchen counter. She stopped abruptly, looking over her shoulder toward the living room, making sure no one was watching. She reached quickly into a small old antique spice tin that always sat next to the salt shaker. It was a beautiful dark silver tin Thomas had brought back from overseas 60 years ago. She grabbed a tiny pinch of something white from inside, added it quickly to the glass of water I used for my medication, and stirred it fast with her finger. Sandra smiled tightly as she handed the glass to me. "Drink up, Mom," she said, her voice too sweet, too smooth. "You need your fluids." I stared at the water. I stared at her eyes. They were cold, empty of the kindness I remembered from childhood. I thought about the symptoms, the immediate cramping, the relentless, impossible high blood pressure despite the lisinopril, the terrible feeling of being toxic, heavy, and failing. Old habits die hard, they say. My instinct was to trust the person who had been my little girl. But deep in my aching gut, I knew that feeling of being poisoned wasn't just fear. It was a terrible, terrifying realization that the failure of my health was not natural. I took the glass from her. I drank the water. The strange taste, metallic, slightly gritty, was fleeting on my tongue. As I lay back in bed, the severe, cramping pain in my stomach started almost immediately. Worse than ever before. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't age. Someone was actively making sure I stayed sick. That was the moment I realized the horrible truth. Sandra wasn't just tired of me. She was trying to kill me. I woke up the next morning feeling like a balloon ready to burst. The bloating was terrible, but the fear had cleared my head like a strong wind. I wasn't just sick. I was under attack. That awful pain the night before, right after drinking the water Sandra gave me. It felt like a punch, not just bad digestion. I had to change my routine. I had to look like I was still dying, but I couldn't drink that poison water anymore. Sandra came in with the glass of water and the cluster of my 5 pills. She had that tight, polite smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "Here you go, Mom. Gotta get those fluids in," she chirped. Her voice was too loud for so early in the morning. I took the glass, making my hand shake a little more than it actually was. I let out a slow, painful groan. "Oh, honey, my stomach is just twisting itself in knots this morning. I feel so unsettled. Can I just hold this for a minute? I need to use the restroom first." Sandra's face twitched. She wanted to rush me, I could tell. She wanted me to drink it right now so she could leave for her appointments. But she couldn't argue about me needing the bathroom. It wouldn't look right. "Fine, but don't spill it," she said, her voice dropping the fake sweetness. She walked out, already pulling her phone up. I closed the door of my room and leaned against it, listening until I heard the light click of the kitchen door closing. Then I looked at the water. It looked normal, clear, but I remembered the metallic, gritty taste from last night. I had a little house plant in the corner, a sad-looking fern my son Michael had given me. It hadn't done well in this dark room. I walked over and, my heart pounding hard in my chest, I slowly poured the whole glass of fluids into the fern's pot. It immediately puddled at the top, looking thick. I grabbed a clean glass from my nightstand, went to the small cold tap in my bathroom sink, and filled it with plain water. Then, I took my 5 pills, the metformin, the lisinopril for my pressure, the statin, and the ibuprofen. Just the pills and the clean water. I waited. The immediate stabbing pain I had felt for weeks, the one that made me instantly bloated and weak. It didn't happen. I still felt heavy, still 79. But that instant, violent twist in my gut was gone. It was like the noise had suddenly stopped. I spent the rest of the morning moving slowly around my room. I didn't want to leave, but I had to know what was in that spice tin. I had to know what Sandra was putting in my water. The knowledge was the only thing keeping me alive right now. I went out into the hallway, moving with my cane. Looking pathetic, which wasn't hard to do. I listened. Nothing. Sandra was long gone, probably showing houses and calculating her future money. I crept into the kitchen. The antique tin, dark silver and beautiful, sat right by the salt shaker just where Thomas had left it decades ago. I grabbed it. It was heavy. I opened the lid. Inside, there was a fine white powder. It looked exactly like sugar, or maybe very fine salt. I brought my finger close, dipped it in lightly, and put it on my tongue. It wasn't sugar. It was intensely, fiercely salty. So salty it made my mouth burn, and water instantly. My legs felt suddenly weak. The amount she had used last night, the pinch she had stirred in quickly, it was enough to ruin any drink. I realized the horrifying truth right then. The pills I was taking were supposed to lower my blood pressure because I had hypertension. Lisinopril works by controlling blood vessels, but excessive sodium, salt, makes the body retain fluid, which dramatically raises blood pressure and makes the lisinopril useless. It was why my home monitor always spiked up to 180 over 110. Despite the medication, she wasn't giving me the wrong medicine. She was making the right medicine fail. She was poisoning me slowly, legally, using something common and invisible. She was turning my own body against the treatment I needed to survive. I stumbled back to my room, the memory of her cold eyes flashing. I couldn't call the police. I couldn't accuse my daughter based only on a bitter taste and a hunch about salt. I needed real evidence, and I needed help that Sandra would never suspect. I thought about the people in my life. Michael, my son, lived too far away in Ohio. My other son, Tom Jr., was traveling for work. My regular doctor was Sandra's friend. My mind kept coming back to the only person who might understand, who had seen enough of the world to believe something this awful. Helen Hayes, the retired nurse next door. Helen was quiet, usually tending her rose bushes. Sandra always called her a witchy health freak, because Helen used herbs and natural remedies. Sandra would never think to suspect Helen. The next day, I waited until Sandra had left. I made sure I was moving slowly, using my cane, just in case she happened to drive by. I walked carefully down the driveway and stood by the fence that separated our yards. "Helen," I called out softly. Helen, with her bright eyes and strong hands, appeared from behind a thick hydrangea bush. She was watering her basil. "Margaret, good morning. You're out early. Careful of the cold." I lowered my voice, moving closer to the wire mesh. I felt like a spy in a bad movie, but I was terrified. "Helen, I need your help. Desperately. I can't tell anyone else. I think Sandra is hurting me." Helen straightened up instantly, her gardening gloves forgotten. Her nurse's instincts took over. "What kind of hurting, Margaret? Has she hit you?" "No, not physically. But I'm sick, Helen, and I'm getting worse every day. The doctors just keep raising my pill dosage. But the numbers never go down. My blood pressure especially. It's been spiking to 180 over 110, and I'm on lisinopril." I told her about the water, the strange metallic taste, and the painful bloating that followed immediately. I told her about the antique tin. "I found a white powder in that tin, Helen. I tasted it. It's incredibly salty." Helen didn't dismiss it. She didn't look at me like I was crazy, which was a huge relief. She looked thoughtful, serious. "Margaret, if you're taking lisinopril, high sodium intake is exactly what you must avoid. It causes massive water retention, severe bloating. And yes, it makes your medication fail spectacularly. It's medically sound, but criminally intentional. Poisoning." My blood ran cold again, confirming the realization I already had. It was intentional. "I need proof, Helen," I whispered. "I can't go to the police without something concrete." I reached into the pocket of my housecoat and pulled out a small empty plastic pill bottle. Before I left my room, I had managed to scrape a tiny bit of the salt residue from the bottom of Thomas's spice tin. Helen took the bottle carefully, holding it up to the light. "I have some testing strips. I worked in the lab for a few years. Let me take this. Wait here, Margaret. I'll be quick." The wait felt like an eternity. The sun felt hot on my back, but I was shaking inside. When Helen returned, her expression was grim. She held the pill bottle like it was toxic. "It is sodium chloride, Margaret. Table salt. Extremely fine grade, probably to dissolve quickly. If she's using even half a teaspoon per dose, it would be enough to cause exactly the symptoms you're having. The severe bloating, the feeling of toxicity, and the impossible high blood pressure." She pointed a finger at me, serious now. "You must stop drinking anything she prepares immediately. Take your pills only with tap water you pour yourself, and you need to monitor those numbers. Your blood pressure readings are dangerous, Margaret. You are walking toward a heart attack or a stroke." I thanked her, feeling a sick wave of gratitude that someone finally believed me. I had a method of attack now, a means of avoiding the poison. But I needed to know why. The answer came 2 days later. Sandra had a habit of leaving her leather briefcase open on the floor of her home office while she was busy on the phone. I knew the moment she left the house that morning. I had to look. "You live and learn," I thought, remembering the old saying. I had learned the hard way that my daughter was not my friend. I moved faster than I had in years, the adrenaline cutting through the chronic fatigue. I slipped into her office. I found her lockbox tucked beneath a pile of thick winter scarves. She kept the key taped to the underside of her desk drawer. "The devil's in the details," I thought, running my finger across the worn tape. Inside the lockbox, I found a stack of papers that confirmed my deepest fears. The first was a series of handwritten notes about money. She had done a recent valuation of the house. $450,000 in equity. That number, the one I had heard her hiss into the phone, was written in bold red ink. Then, the second document. It was a life insurance policy, one Thomas and I had taken out decades ago. The policy was large, meant to secure my retirement, but there was a critical clause, highlighted in yellow marker. The payout, which was substantial, would become completely null and void if I survived past my 80th birthday. I felt like all the air had been punched out of me. My 80th birthday was in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. She wasn't just hoping I would die soon. She was racing the calendar. She was trying to finish the job before I hit the deadline, and the insurance money vanished. The physical pain of the bloating and the high pressure seemed small compared to the crushing emotional blow. She wasn't tired of me. She hated me. Her love, my child's bond, was worth less than a line item on an insurance form. The betrayal was an internal scream, a sound that wouldn't leave my chest. I sat there, trembling, clutching the papers. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. But the evidence, the salt, the high blood pressure, the insurance clause, it all fit together like a morbid puzzle. I thought about giving up. I was tired, so tired. Maybe I should just let the salt do its work, let her get her money, and finally be free of this awful situation. The truth will set you free. But sometimes the truth just tells you how horrible the world is. But then I thought about Thomas. I thought about the sheer work I had put into this life, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices. Sandra wasn't just killing me. She was erasing my life's work for greed. I wouldn't let her win. Not now. Not when I finally understood the game. I decided that very minute that I would fight back. I couldn't let her see my strength, though. I had to look weaker, more confused than ever before. If she thought I was failing, she would get careless. That night, when Sandra gave me the water, I did my performance. I swayed, pretended to cough weakly, and whispered that my back was killing me. I waited until she left, poured the salty water down the drain this time, and took my pills with tap water. The next day, I went back to Helen. I showed her the insurance policy. 3 weeks, Helen. I have 3 weeks until my 80th birthday. She's accelerating the poison. We have to do more than just avoid the salt. I need to get these numbers down. The high pressure and the diabetes. Those are the metrics she's watching. Helen listened patiently. She was a professional. Margaret, we need a silent counterattack. Something natural that helps lower inflammation and pressure, but won't interfere with your heart meds. We need to normalize your numbers without alerting your doctors. Or Sandra. She walked me through her kitchen and pulled down a small glass jar filled with dried greenish-brown leaves. This is your secret weapon, Margaret. Bay leaf. Laurus nobilis, she explained. Western medicine tends to overlook it for this, but it's a powerful anti-inflammatory and a tremendous digestive aid. For decades, it's been known to help stabilize blood sugar and lower cholesterol. We need to treat your functional dyspepsia and lower the metrics Sandra is monitoring. Helen sat me down and gave me a specific, clear protocol, like a seasoned drill sergeant. You will use exactly on 2 dried leaves, no more, no less, in 500 milliliters of boiling water, which is about 17 ounces. You must let it steep for 15 minutes, and this is critical. You must strain it carefully. The whole leaves are dangerous to swallow, especially for us old folks. She handed me a jar. This, taken once daily, will help reduce the horrible bloating and inflammation the salt caused. Studies show that using this amount daily can potentially reduce your fasting blood sugar by 21% and cholesterol by 20%. It's safe in these small amounts. But you must monitor your blood sugar carefully because of your metformin. I took the jar, clutching it tight. This was it. This was my hidden medicine. Sandra thought she was feeding me poison. I was secretly ingesting a cure. The next morning I started my new life. While Sandra was in the shower, I secretly boiled water in a small electric kettle I kept hidden under my spare linens. I measured the 2 leaves, watched them steep for the full 15 minutes, and strained the pale green tea carefully into a thermos. I hid the bay leaf tea in a jar of iced tea in the refrigerator, something Sandra never drank. I continued to pretend to be weak, taking my pills with plain water and acting miserable. But inside I was feeling the shift. The bay leaf tea worked fast. Within 3 days, the terrible tight feeling in my gut started to ease. The fierce, angry bloating receded, and I could breathe better. I realized how much pain I had normalized over the past year. Helen had given me a small, portable blood pressure monitor and a separate glucometer. I measured my vitals every morning, right after discarding Sandra's poison water. Before starting the bay leaf tea, my fasting blood sugar was stuck around 280 milligrams per deciliter. 7 days into the secret protocol, the reading was consistently in the 220s. That was a huge drop, and the blood pressure, which Sandra's salt was trying to push to stroke level, was slowing its dangerous climb. It still bounced high, but now the average reading was 145/95. Still high, but clearly lower than the 180/110 it had been. I was recovering faster than I thought possible. I had to keep the decline facade perfect. I practiced my slow walk. I used my cane more dramatically. I feigned confusion when Sandra talked about finances. I would say things like, "The house equity? What equity, dear? I don't understand these papers." My feigned weakness made Sandra aggressive. She got careless, just as I hoped. One Tuesday evening, she came into my room, looking triumphant and stressed all at once. "Mom, we need to get the paperwork done now," she insisted, tapping a thick legal folder. "Your doctor, Dr. Jensen, said you need full-time care, and frankly, I can't do it. We need to liquidate the assets." She meant the house. She meant the $450,000. "Liquidation? What does that mean, dear?" I managed, making my voice small and wavering. "It means selling the house. You can't take care of yourself anymore. I'm meeting the lawyer, Mr. Thompson, on Friday to finalize the power of attorney transfer. You just need to sign a few papers." I nodded slowly, looking confused. But beneath the blanket, I was clutching something new. A small, silver digital recorder Thomas had given me years ago to record our church choir practices. It was recording everything. "Sign where you need me to, honey," I mumbled, letting her believe she had won completely. I now had 2 key pieces of evidence: the physical proof of the poison, the salt residue and Helen's testimony, and the financial motive captured on that small silver machine, all pointing to the Friday signing. The realization hit me. She was speeding up the timeline because my birthday was 3 weeks away. That meeting with the lawyer on Friday was likely the very last chance for her to secure the power of attorney, liquidate the house, and ensure I was either dead or incapable before the insurance deadline. She didn't know that my blood pressure was already holding steady. A strong 135/85 this morning, thanks to clean water and 2 bay leaves. That Friday morning, I let Sandra dress me. She was bustling, too excited, talking about the great future she had planned for herself once this was settled. I leaned heavily on the cane as we walked to the car, looking every bit the frail, sick old woman she intended me to be. "Just a quick trip to the lawyer, Mom. "It'll be over before you know it," Sandra cooed, a triumphant glint in her eyes that made my stomach turn. I let myself be helped into the passenger seat. I looked out the window at the suburban Portland street rolling by. I wasn't holding the cane for support anymore. I was clutching the small silver digital recorder in one hand and a printout of my morning blood pressure, reading from Helen's home monitor in the other. I felt strong, alert, and terrifyingly clear-headed. I knew exactly where we were going. I was going to the lawyer's office just as she planned, but I wasn't going there to sign away my life. I was going there to end her scheme, using the very numbers Sandra thought were killing me as the final proof. Faltavam dos horas. Dos horas for my daughter to discover that the mother she tried to kill was more alive than ever. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story will travel. Friday morning, precisely at 10:30. The tension inside Mr. Thompson's elite downtown law office was thick enough to cut with a knife. We were on the 15th floor of the Pacific Tower, in a conference room paneled in dark cherry wood, overlooking a gray, damp Portland cityscape. Sandra steered me inside, gripping my elbow with a nervous excitement I could feel radiating off her. She was wearing a crisp white suit, ready for her victory lap. She expected only me and the lawyer. Her practiced smile evaporated the moment she took in the scene. Already seated at the massive mahogany table were Mr. Thompson, the family lawyer, my loyal son Michael, who had flown in from Ohio the night before, and Helen Hayes, my neighbor and secret ally, wearing a sensible navy dress. The shock of seeing Michael was enough to make Sandra stumble, but when two men in dark suits, Detective Miller of the Portland Elder Abuse Unit and his partner, stood up from the far corner of the room, Sandra gasped, stepping back so quickly that the expensive heels of her shoes scraped loudly on the polished floor. "Mom, what is this?" Her voice cracked, tight with sudden sickening panic. "Michael, what are you doing here? Did you call the police?" Margaret O'Connell, who had entered shuffling, leaning on my cane, looked at the 5 people who had stood by me. I placed my cane carefully against the wall. Then I walked the last 5 feet to the table unassisted. I moved with a firmness I hadn't felt in years, my posture straight, my eyes clear. The pain that had defined the last year of my life was gone, replaced by a terrible, clear resolve. Sandra stared at me, her mouth slightly open. The detective looked intrigued. Mr. Thompson adjusted his tie, his expression a mixture of professional formality and deep discomfort. "This, Sandra," I stated, my voice steady, no longer the weak, wavering whisper she was used to, "is the final meeting you planned, but I'm not here to sign away my life. I'm here to reclaim it." I put the small silver digital recorder that Thomas gave me onto the polished wood surface. It looked small and harmless, but it held the poison of her intent. "Before we discuss the power of attorney transfer, I want everyone to hear why we are really here." I pressed play. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the thin metallic sound of Sandra's voice, recorded just 2 nights before, talking about me. "I can't afford to keep you here when my business is struggling. I'm meeting the lawyer, Mr. Thompson, on Friday to finalize the POA transfer. We need to liquidate the $450,000 equity now, before your 80th birthday." The recording clicked off. Sandra stumbled back into a chair, her face a sheet of ashen white. She attempted to gather herself, her hands shaking as she smoothed her skirt. That's taken out of context. We were discussing my business finances, Mom. You wouldn't understand," she stammered, appealing desperately to Mr. Thompson. I didn't let her finish. I pulled out the second piece of evidence from my large leather purse, the insurance policy. I slid it across the table toward the detective, pointing precisely at the highlighted clause. $450,000 in equity and a substantial insurance payout that would become null and void if I survived past my 80th birthday. I explained, my voice chillingly calm. My birthday is in 3 weeks. She was racing the clock, gentlemen. That was the motive. Sandra tried to rise, her chair scraping again, but Detective Miller held up a hand. Sit down, Miss O'Connell. Then Helen Hayes stepped forward, placing 2 sealed evidence bags on the table. The first contained the fine white residue scraped from the antique spice tin. The second was a printed laboratory report. This residue, Helen announced, her nurse's voice crisp and professional, is confirmed to be pure sodium chloride, fine ground salt. Margaret, my client, was taking lisinopril for hypertension. Excessive sodium intake directly counters the effect of lisinopril, causing massive fluid retention and spiking her blood pressure. I placed my final piece of evidence next to the bags, the printout of my recovered health numbers. For weeks, despite maximum dosage of blood pressure medication, my readings were spiking at 180/110, exactly as planned by my daughter. I continued, looking directly at Sandra. You thought you were killing me slowly, Sandra, but I was secretly healing myself. My blood pressure this morning? 135/85. Stable, safe, and achieved by discarding your poison and using a simple, natural, anti-inflammatory protocol. 2 bay leaves in boiling water, strained and consumed daily. The contrast hit the room like a physical blow. The sick old woman had fixed her own numbers, using a method her professional daughter had scoffed at. Sandra erupted. She slammed her hand down on the table, tears of manufactured panic springing to her eyes. Mom, how can you do this? I am your blood. I am your only daughter, she shrieked, her voice high and uncontrolled. You are going to send me to prison over a few dollars? Think of the family. This is an exaggeration, a mistake. I met her gaze, utterly devoid of the warmth she was appealing to. My voice was low, steady, a current of steel that cut through her hysteria. I spent my life sewing through the night, selling uniforms and fixing dresses, just so you could have a good start and always have a roof over your head, I said. You tried to repay that sacrifice by poisoning me with cheap salt, day after day, just to steal $450,000 in equity and collect insurance money. You ceased to be my daughter the moment you decided my life was worth less than a line item on an insurance form. The woman I raised would be ashamed of you. I do not know you anymore. Detective Miller stepped forward instantly, pulling out the cuffs. Sandra O'Connell, you are under arrest for attempted manslaughter and financial elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Sandra fought the cuffs, screaming obscenities, collapsing entirely, calling Michael a traitor, and me, a wicked, vengeful old woman. She was led out of the conference room, her screams fading down the hallway and into the elevator. The silence that followed was profound. Mr. Thompson, visibly shaken, immediately confirmed that the power of attorney signing was nullified. He stamped the papers void with heavy red ink. Michael leaned across the table and hugged me tight, shaking with relief. I felt calm, quiet, and strangely powerful. The physical weight of the poison was gone, and now the heavy weight of the fear and the lie was lifted too. The justice Sandra received was swift and complete. Anchored by the documented medical evidence, Helen's testimony, and the cold audio recording of her financial calculation, Sandra faced a devastating prosecution, She was convicted of attempted manslaughter and aggravated financial fraud against an elderly person. She received a sentence of 12 years in state prison, with a mandatory minimum of 8 years to be served in regime fachado. The court also ordered severe civil penalties. Sandra was permanently stripped of her professional real estate license and was ordered to pay me $750,000 in damages, compensating for the medical expenses, emotional trauma, and the costs associated with the investigation. She was financially ruined, losing all professional standing and any claim to the life she desperately wanted to secure with my death. The consequences were far-reaching. Sandra's husband filed for an immediate hostile divorce, taking the remaining unattached assets. The Portland community where Sandra had been a fixture, selling homes and aspiring to status, completely rejected her. Acquaintances and professional colleagues cut off contact entirely. The shame, which she had tried to avoid, became her sole legacy. Sandra currently serves her sentence at the Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, isolated and without contact from any family member other than the obligatory visits from her overworked defense attorney. The only thing she secured was profound debt and a locked cell. My recovery, however, was beautiful. A year later, at 80 years old, I am unrecognizable from the frail woman who entered Sandra's car that morning. I fully embraced the rigorous yet simple discipline that saved my life. I no longer rely on a cane and walk 3 miles every morning. I shed 23 pounds of dangerous fluid-retained weight. My blood pressure, once spiking at 180/110, is now consistently at a vibrant 120/78, better than many women decades my junior. My fasting blood sugar stabilized, dipping from the dangerous 280 milligrams per deciliter down to a healthy 135 milligrams per deciliter, managed effectively by the combination of metformin and my daily bay leaf tea. I used a small portion of the secured insurance money and the legal damages to establish the Bay Leaf Initiative. Operating primarily out of the community center, the initiative focuses on medical autonomy for the elderly. We teach simple, proven methods, like the bay leaf protocol, to manage inflammation and blood sugar naturally, alongside crucial lessons on monitoring their own vital numbers. We focus on teaching them to be medically autonomous, aware of how simple dietary sabotage, like excess sodium, can turn life-saving medicine into poison. I coordinate 3 groups a week, aided by Helen, who serves as my medical advisor. Helen now lives in a renovated carriage house on my property, which we purchased for her with the damage settlement. We have helped over 200 elderly individuals stabilize their numbers and regain confidence in their own bodies. My life is simple now, filled with purpose. Michael visits every month, and we spend hours working on the initiative's online resources. I found peace in the quiet rhythms of my day, walking, gardening, and teaching. I learned that my body was never the failure. It was merely reflecting the toxicity I allowed into my life. Once I removed the poison, the physical salt, and the emotional betrayal, my body responded immediately with strength. I never regretted the decision. Sometimes, when the sun is setting and I am sitting on my porch, enjoying the quiet of the Portland evening, I think about the woman Sandra wanted me to be. A victim, confused, silent, and dead before my 80th birthday. She wanted me to die by salt, thinking numbers were just a professional trap. I lived to teach others how to survive by knowing those numbers. The house she craved, valued at $450,000 in equity, now serves as the headquarters for the very movement dedicated to reversing the kind of silent abuse she inflicted. The greatest vengeance isn't revenge. It is living well, long, and free, and teaching others how to do the same. My blood pressure is 120/78. My soul is finally at rest, and I realize that the most powerful medicine is the truth. And if you stayed with me until the end, leave a comment letting me know what you thought of the story and what kinds of stories you'd like to read more of. Thank you so much for being here. See you in the next emotional story.